When people ask me why I rarely attend family gatherings anymore, I usually smile and say, "Oh, I'm just not a crowd person." It's easier that way. Easier than explaining how one night, in front of a room full of people I trusted, everything changed. That night, my stepmother and her friends went too far. It was supposed to be a simple get-together. Laughter, music, and maybe a few harmless jokes. But sometimes what starts as fun can turn into something that leaves a scar. I didn't know it then, but that night would become one of those memories that stays with you long after the lights go out and the laughter fades. I still remember the smell of perfume and wine, the sound of clinking glasses, and my stepmother's laugh. A laugh I used to love because it meant she was happy. I'd always wanted her approval, even when I was too old to admit it. When she married my father, I was already in my late teens. I didn't see her as a mother, not really, but I respected her. She made my father smile again after years of loneliness. I wanted to believe she would care for me too. Maybe not like a mother, but at least like family. That night started out perfectly normal. She had invited her friends over, women from her office, a few neighbors, even my father's cousin. The living room smelled of cinnamon candles and freshly baked bread. I helped her set the table, just to make her proud. She smiled at me once and said, "You're such a sweet girl, always helping." It warmed me inside. I thought maybe finally we were turning a corner. But as the night went on, the laughter got louder and the tone changed. The women started talking about family, about stepchildren, and about how hard it was to blend households. I sat quietly, not sure whether to laugh or stay silent. And then one of them looked at me and said, "You must give her a hard time, huh?" Before I could answer, my stepmother chuckled and said, "Oh, you have no idea." Everyone laughed. I smiled politely, pretending not to care. But then she kept going. Little stories, small exaggerations, half-truths about my habits, about mistakes I'd made years ago. Each one stung a little more than the last. I waited for her to stop. She didn't. By the time my father came into the room, the damage was done. Everyone was laughing, and I was sitting there, wishing I could disappear. That night, I realized something. Sometimes the people who embarrass you the most are not strangers. They're the ones who claim to love you. I was 17 when my father remarried. It had been just the two of us for almost 4 years after my mother passed away. Those 4 years felt long and heavy, full of silence, simple dinners, and the quiet ache of two people trying to pretend they were doing fine. When my father met Linda, that's my stepmother, I saw the change in him right away. He smiled more. He started whistling again while shaving, something I hadn't heard since before my mother got sick. At first, I didn't mind. In fact, I wanted him to be happy. I remember him sitting me down one evening, his voice soft but uncertain. "Sweetheart," he said, "you'll like her. She's kind and she understands what we've been through." I nodded, even though I wasn't sure what to feel. Linda entered our lives gently, like a guest who didn't want to intrude. She brought flowers on her visits, always the same kind, white lilies, my mother's favorite. Maybe that was her way of showing respect, or maybe it was coincidence. I never asked. She'd compliment my cooking, comment on my grades, and sometimes bring little gifts, a scarf, a journal, or a set of earrings. She seemed thoughtful, and I wanted to like her. When they got married a year later, the house changed. Suddenly, it smelled different. More perfume, more polish, more order. Linda had a way of making everything spotless, even the corners no one looked at. She rearranged the furniture, hung up new curtains, and replaced the old photo frames with ones that matched in color. She even replaced the picture of my mother on the hallway table with one of all three of us together, smiling, coordinated, like a real family. I told myself that was a good thing. That's what families did, right? They made new memories. They moved forward. For the most part, we got along fine. She wasn't cruel, not in the way some stepmothers are in stories. She didn't yell or forbid things, but there is something about her, something distant, like she was always half-conscious of proving she belonged here. She cared about appearances, the perfect dinner table, the spotless kitchen, the neighbors' opinions. And I think deep down, she wanted to show everyone she was doing everything right, including being a good stepmother. There were small moments when she let her guard down, when she'd laugh too loudly at a TV show, or talk about her old friends, or even cry when she thought no one was watching. Once, I found her sitting by the window late at night, staring outside. When I asked if she was okay, she said, "It's just strange, isn't it? Living in a house that used to belong to someone else's story." I didn't know how to answer, but I understood, because I felt the same. For a while, it felt like we were learning to share the same home without stepping on each other's shadows. But small things started to pile up, like the way she'd correct me when guests were over. "Use a coaster, dear." Or, "That's not quite how your father likes his coffee." Or how she'd compliment me, but in a way that stung. "You're pretty, just like your mom was. Maybe even more if you'd smile more often." Tiny words, small smiles, harmless on their own, but together they built a wall. Still, I tried to be grateful. I wanted peace. My father seemed happy, and that was what mattered most to me. We had quiet dinners most nights. I'd help Linda in the kitchen, setting the table while she talked about her day. She worked as an office manager at a real estate firm, always dressed neatly, hair pinned, lipstick perfect. She liked control, in her job, in her home, in her image. And I think sometimes she didn't realize that in trying to make everything perfect, she made everyone around her walk on eggshells. My father didn't notice much. He loved her sincerely, almost blindly. Whenever he saw tension between us, he'd smile and say, "You two will figure it out. You're both strong women." I didn't have the heart to tell him that strength wasn't the problem. It was pride. Then came the idea of hosting gatherings. Linda loved entertaining. She said it made a house feel alive. At first, it was small. Coffee with neighbors, casual dinners with her colleagues, but eventually she started throwing bigger parties, especially when my father was away on business trips. She'd invite her friends, women I barely knew, who wore shiny dresses, talked about travel and promotions, and always seemed just a little too interested in gossip. I'd help serve drinks, arrange snacks, and keep the kitchen running smoothly. I didn't mind being the helper. I liked seeing people laugh, even if I didn't belong in their world. But there was always that one thing, a certain tone they used when they talked to me, like I was something to be tolerated rather than included. Linda never corrected them. Sometimes she even joined in, lightly teasing me about being the shy one or too serious for my age. One night, after one of those gatherings, she told me, "You need to loosen up, honey. People like confidence." I smiled politely. "Maybe I'm just not like you," I said. She laughed. "Well, you'll learn. Everyone does." Looking back, now I think that was the first sign that something was brewing beneath the surface. something that would eventually spill over. The night everything changed was supposed to be one of those harmless evenings. Music, wine, laughter echoing from the living room. But that night, her laughter felt different, louder, sharper. And before I knew it, I was no longer part of the evening. I was the entertainment. Still, before that night, I truly believed we were finding our rhythm. I thought maybe, in time, we could be close. Not mother and daughter, but maybe something gentler. Two people choosing kindness over history. The months that followed were filled with uneasy peace. On the surface, everything looked perfect. Dinner served on time, polite smiles, the smell of fresh flowers in every corner. But underneath that calm rhythm lived something brittle, something that could crack at any moment. Linda and I rarely argued outright. Instead, there were long pauses, unfinished sentences, and the feeling that every small thing I did somehow disappointed her. If I spoke too softly, she'd tell me to speak up. If I offered an opinion, she'd say, "You always take things too personally." I learned to stay quiet, to smile when spoken to nod even when I didn't agree. My father didn't see the strain. He was traveling more, spending weeks away for work. When he was home, everything looked peaceful. Linda laughed easily, I acted cheerful, and no one mentioned the silence that filled the house when he wasn't around. It became our unspoken rule. Keep things looking good. Linda's friends kept visiting. They adored her, always complimenting her cooking, her taste, her charm. I'd hover in the background, helping serve drinks or tidy the table. Sometimes I'd hear my name in their conversations, always followed by a laugh that was unkind but still hurt. "She's so quiet," one of them would say. Linda would smile. "Oh yes, she's shy, like her father. We're trying to bring her out of her shell." It was never cruel, but it chipped away at something inside me. That small, tender hope of belonging. One Saturday afternoon, while helping her set up for another gathering, I heard her on the phone with one of her friends. "She's sweet, but she still acts like a guest here. I don't know how to get through to her." I froze at the doorway, half wanting to step in and half wanting to disappear. When she noticed me, she looked startled, then smiled, as if nothing had happened. "Oh, I was just saying nice things about you," she said lightly. But her voice wavered, and I could feel the distance widen between us. After that, I stopped helping as eagerly. I still did my chores, still stayed polite, but something inside me shut down. I started spending more time in my room, reading or writing in my journal. I thought if I stayed out of the way, things might calm down. But silence has its own way of speaking, and Linda didn't like silence. She began to tease me more in front of people. Small things at first, my cooking, my clothes, my taste in music. Harmless jokes, she called them. Everyone laughed. So I forced a laugh too. But when laughter becomes a habit, it stops being real. Then came the night of her company celebration. It was a big event. She'd been promoted, and she wanted to celebrate at home with her closest friends. My father was away on business, so it was just Linda, her friends, and me. I should ask to help serve appetizers and take photos, just for memories. I agreed, trying to show support. The guests arrived dressed beautifully, perfume trailing behind them like expensive clouds. They filled the living room with noise and energy. I stayed near the kitchen, watching from a quiet distance, smiling when spoken to. Linda looked radiant, laughing, gesturing, glowing with pride. For a while, everything felt fine. Then someone asked about her family. "Your husband's daughter, she lives here too, right?" one woman said. Linda gestured toward me. "Oh yes, that's her. Come here, sweetheart." All eyes turned to me. I wiped my hands and walked over, feeling suddenly small in the middle of all those confident, polished women. "This girl," Linda said, half laughing, "has the patience of a saint. She puts up with my crazy routines." The women chuckled. I smiled politely, unsure what else to do. She's too serious sometimes, always thinking, never relaxing. I keep telling her one day she'll learn to laugh like us. A few people laughed again. Someone handed me a drink I didn't want. It might have ended there, just harmless teasing. But as the evening went on, the jokes grew bolder. The more they drank, the louder they got. At one point, one of Linda's friends asked, "Did she ever sneak out or do something wild?" Linda laughed and said, "Oh, you have no idea. This one once tried to bake a cake and nearly burned the kitchen down." They roared with laughter. My face burned, but I smiled anyway. I wanted to believe it was harmless fun, but it didn't stop. Each story turned into a performance, an exaggerated version of me, a character built out of every small mistake I'd ever made. And the worst part, everyone was watching Linda, not me. They adored her storytelling, her charm, her energy. I had become the background to her show. At one point, she put her hand on my shoulder and said, "You see, she's so sensitive. Don't take it personally, honey. We're just having fun." The room laughed again. My throat tightened, but I said softly, "It's fine." Inside, it wasn't fine. It hadn't been fine for a long time. After midnight, when the guests finally left, the house was silent except for the faint sound of music still playing from her phone. I started clearing the glasses. Linda walked over, a little unsteady, but still smiling. "Oh, don't look so upset," she said. "You have to learn not to take things to heart." Her words were slurred but gentle. Then she added quietly, "People only tease the ones they care about." I didn't answer. I just nodded, then went to my room. That night, I cried, but quietly, like someone practicing invisibility, because even in my hurt, I didn't want my father to know. The days that followed felt strange. Linda acted like nothing had happened. She hummed while cleaning, sent photos of the party to her friends, and even asked me to print a few for an album. In one picture, she was laughing, head thrown back, surrounded by her friends. I was in the background, blurred, carrying a tray. That image stayed with me. It captured exactly how I felt. Present, but unseen. For weeks, I avoided her gatherings. I made excuses, stayed in my room, or went to the library. When she noticed, she asked, "Are you upset with me?" I said no. But she knew. And that unspoken tension made every meal, every shared silence heavier. One evening when my father was home, Linda tried to joke about it again. "Your daughter's becoming quite the hermit," she said lightly. My father smiled. "She just needs time. She's always been sensitive." Linda nodded, but said nothing more. The conversation ended, but something inside me shifted. I realized she would never truly understand the weight of that night. Or maybe she did, and it was easier to pretend she didn't. The turning point didn't arrive as a storm. It came quietly, almost politely, like a knock on the door you try to ignore but can't. Weeks passed after that night. The air in the house was thick with politeness, the kind that hides discomfort behind tidy smiles. Linda and I spoke only about practical things: groceries, laundry, the mail. My father stayed blissfully unaware. I thought maybe time would blur the memory, that one day it would feel small. But it didn't. It sat inside me, replaying at odd moments, while washing dishes, while brushing my hair. Even when I passed the living room, where that laughter once filled the air. One Sunday morning, while I was making breakfast, Linda walked in wearing her robe, her hair still messy from sleep. She looked at me and smiled faintly. "You're up early." I nodded, keeping my eyes on the frying pan. She sat at the counter, silent for a while, then said, "You've been distant lately." I swallowed hard. "I've just been busy." "Busy avoiding me?" she asked, her tone half teasing, half serious. I didn't answer. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said softly, "If this is about that party night, I hope you know it wasn't meant to hurt you." I froze. I hadn't expected her to bring it up. She continued, "Everyone was just having fun. I guess we got carried away." I turned off the stove, my hands trembling slightly. "You embarrassed me," I said quietly, "in front of everyone." She blinked as if the words surprised her. "Oh, come on, it was just teasing." "It wasn't just teasing," I said, my voice steady now. "It made me feel small." Silence filled the kitchen. The only sound was the faint ticking of the clock. For the first time, she didn't look confident. She looked uncertain. "I didn't mean to," she murmured. "I thought you were laughing with us." "I was trying to," I said, "because I didn't want to make a scene, because I thought if I smiled enough, maybe you'd stop." Her eyes softened, but her pride fought to stay in place. "Well, I'm sorry if it came across that way," she said, choosing her words carefully. "It wasn't quite an apology, more like a bridge that didn't reach the other side." I took a slow breath. "Do you ever think about how it feels to be the joke in your own house?" That question hung between us like smoke. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Finally, she whispered, "I suppose I don't." That was the moment something shifted, not just between us, but inside her. I could see it in her eyes, the realization that her laughter had cost more than she thought. She stood up quietly, walked to the sink, and stared out the window. "You know," she said softly, "I spent years trying to prove I could fit into this family. Maybe I forgot that you were trying to hold it together too." Her honesty caught me off guard. For the first time, I saw her not as the polished woman who embarrassed me, but as another person trying too hard to be accepted. We didn't say much else that morning, but something invisible had cracked open. Not a wound this time, but a window. A week later, my father came home from his business trip. Linda greeted him with her usual cheer, but I noticed how careful she was around me. She didn't tease, didn't make jokes. Instead, she asked me to help her cook dinner. It was awkward at first, two people dancing around old hurt, but the silence between us felt lighter somehow. While we chopped vegetables, she said, "I told your father about that night. I told him I made a mistake." I looked up in surprise. "You did?" She nodded. "He was disappointed, not in you, in me. And honestly, I think I needed that." Her voice trembled slightly, and for the first time, I felt no anger toward her, only tired compassion. That evening, after dinner, my father suggested we take a photo, the three of us. It wasn't perfect. My smile was small, hers was nervous, his was hopeful. But still, it was a start. The real turning point, though, came a few days later. Linda had invited me to join her for a walk around the neighborhood. I almost said no, but something in her tone stopped me. We walked quietly under the fading sunset, the air cool and soft. After a while, she said, "You know, when I first moved here, I felt like an outsider. Everything in this house reminded me that I wasn't your mother. I tried to fill that space, but maybe that was never my place to fill. I listened in silence. She sighed. I thought if I made everyone laugh, if I looked perfect, maybe people would accept me. I didn't realize I was losing your respect in the process. Her words hung heavy in the air. I looked at her and said, "You didn't have to be my mother. You just had to be kind." She nodded slowly. "I see that now." We walked a little further, neither of us speaking. The evening light stretched long shadows across the pavement. For the first time, it felt like we were walking side by side, not as enemies, not even as strangers, but as two women learning how to forgive each other in quiet ways. That conversation didn't erase what happened, but it softened it. Sometimes, forgiveness doesn't come in big declarations or tearful hugs. Sometimes it comes in small, awkward walks, in the spaces between words, in the simple act of trying again. From that night forward, I decided to stop holding the memory like a wound. Instead, I carried it like a lesson, a reminder that pride, laughter, and misunderstanding can all wound deeper than we intend. Time has a strange way of smoothing out the edges of pain. It doesn't erase what happened. It just teaches you how to live with it, how to let it breathe without letting it consume you. After that evening walk with Linda, things began to shift slowly, like the first hints of spring after a long winter. We didn't talk about that night again, but the air between us grew softer. She started asking my opinion on small things, the color of the curtains, what to cook for dinner, which blouse looked better for a party. It wasn't much, but it felt like her way of saying, "I want you included." One afternoon, she knocked gently on my bedroom door. "Hey," she said, holding up an old photo album. "Your dad said you used to help him organize these. Want to give me a hand?" I hesitated and nodded. We sat cross-legged on the living room floor, flipping through yellowed pages. There were pictures of my mom, smiling, alive, young. For a long time, we didn't speak. I could feel her glancing at me, uncertain whether she was intruding on something sacred. Finally, she whispered, "She was beautiful." "She was," I said, tracing my fingers over a faded photo. Linda smiled faintly. "I don't try to compete with her, you know?" I looked up, surprised. She continued softly, "I know I can't be her. I just hope one day you'll see me as someone who cares, in her own clumsy way." Something about her honesty made my chest ache. I nodded. "I think I already do." She blinked quickly, like she was holding back tears. It was the first time we had ever spoken openly about my mother. From that day on, something between us changed. Over the next few weeks, the house began to feel lighter. Dinner wasn't a battlefield anymore. We laughed, sometimes genuinely. Even Dad noticed. He'd look between us, smiling quietly, like a man watching peace return to a home he thought was broken forever. One evening, as we were setting the table, Linda said, "You know, I'm planning a little dinner for your dad's birthday. Just close friends and family. Would you help me with it?" There was a time when I would have found a reason to say no. But this time, I said yes. Planning that dinner turned out to be the bridge we didn't know we needed. We spent the afternoon cooking, decorating, even teasing each other about who was more bossy in the kitchen. When the guests arrived, laughter filled the house again. But this time, it didn't sting. It felt real. At one point during the evening, I caught Linda's eye from across the room. She smiled, a quiet, grateful smile. And for the first time, I smiled back without hesitation. Later that night, after everyone had left, I found her in the kitchen washing dishes. "Hey," I said, leaning against the counter. "The dinner turned out great." She chuckled. "It did, didn't it?" There was a pause before I added softly, "You did good tonight." She turned, her eyes wide for a moment, then warm. Coming from you, that means more than you know. I shrugged, pretending to brush it off, but inside, something loosened, a knot I'd carried for far too long. Weeks turned into months, and slowly Linda became part of the rhythm of my life. Not in a forced way, but in the quiet, everyday gestures that make a home feel whole again. She'd leave a note on the fridge before work. Breakfast in the oven. Don't skip it this time. Or she'd bring home little things, a scarf she thought would look good on me, a book she said reminded her of me. Small things, but they meant everything. Sometimes we'd sit together in the evenings, each reading our own book. The silence was comfortable now, not cold, not strained, just peaceful. One night, out of nowhere, she said, "Do you ever think about how strange families are? How we end up loving people we never thought we could?" I smiled. "Yeah, I think about that a lot." She looked at me, then whispered, "Thank you for giving me another chance." And for the first time, I realized I wasn't pretending anymore when I said, "You earned it." That winter, we took our first trip together, just the two of us. Dad had to stay behind for work, and Linda suggested a weekend at a quiet cabin by the lake. The first morning there, I woke up to the sound of her humming softly in the kitchen. She was making pancakes, badly. The edges were too crisp, the centers too soft, but she looked so proud of herself I couldn't help but laugh. "What's funny?" she asked, flipping one messily. "Nothing," I said. "They look perfect." She squinted at me, suspicious. "You're lying." "Maybe a little," I said, smiling. We sat by the window, eating our imperfect pancakes while snow fell outside. It was quiet, but the good kind of quiet. The kind that comes when forgiveness finally finds a place to rest. That evening, as the fire crackled, Linda said something I'll never forget. "You know, I used to think love was about being accepted, but I've learned it's more about learning where you fit and respecting where others already belong." I nodded slowly. "I think we finally figured that out," I said. She smiled. "Maybe we did." For the first time, it didn't feel like we were step anything. We were just us. Two women who had hurt, healed, and somehow found a way to meet in the middle. When we got home, Dad was waiting at the door. He pulled us both into a hug, laughing. "You two survived a whole weekend alone?" he joked. Linda winked at him. "Barely." We all laughed, and for once, it wasn't forced. That night, as I went to my room, I paused at the door and looked back. Linda was sitting beside Dad, their hands intertwined, both smiling softly. It struck me then, life doesn't always give you the family you expect. Sometimes it gives you the one that teaches you the hardest lessons first, and love only afterward. The wound that once burned every time I thought of that night had finally faded into something gentler. A reminder of how fragile pride can be and how strong forgiveness truly is. Linda and I never became best friends or perfect mother and daughter, but we became something real. Two women who had chosen understanding over bitterness. And maybe that's all a family really needs.